أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Brothers and sisters in Islam, Salamun Alaykum wa Rahmatullahi wa Barakatuhu. Before we start today's event, let us send our blessings on the Messenger of Allah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam with the loudest of your voices. So again, same as last week, there's no effort from the ladies' side, so can we have a loud salawat from everyone, please? Okay, firstly, I'd like to thank everyone for attending today's event. And as you all are aware, this week is entitled Ashura Awareness Week. And that is exactly what we aim to do. We want to make people aware of Ashura. We want to make people aware about the events that occurred leading to Ashura and what happened after the day of Ashura. The month of Muharram and Safar, especially the first 12 nights of Muharram, are of great sadness to the Muslim community due to the tragic events that occurred in Karbala. Imam Hussayn and his family gave their lives away in the name of Islam and in the end for us and our generation, because had they not given up their lives and sacrificed so much, we wouldn't be here today sitting in this hall with Sayyid, who's going to give us the lecture today. And who knows where the message of Islam would have been had they not sacrificed so much for us. So today we have the honor of having Sayed Ali Abass Razawi with us today, who's going to give us a talk about Ashura and how it was such a revolution that affected the whole world. But before I call upon Sayyid, I would like to call upon Brother Hussayn Lalji, who will bless this event with the recitation of the Holy Quran. Can we please welcome him with a loud salawat?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والفجر وليال عشر والشفع والوتر والليل إذا يسر هل في ذلك قسم لذي حجر ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بعاد إرم ذات العماد التي لم يخلق مثلها في البلاد وثمود الذين جابوا الصخر بالواد وفرعون ذي الأوتاد الذين طغوا في البلاد فأكثروا فيها الفساد فصب عليهم ربك صوت عذاب إن ربك لبالمرصاد فأما الإنسان إذا ما ابتلاه ربه فأكرمه ونعمه فيقول ربي أكرمن وأما إذا ما ابتلاه فقدر عليه رزقه فيقول ربي أهانن كلا بل لا تكرمون اليتيم ولا تحاجون على طعام المسكين ولا تحاضون على طعام المسكين وتأكلون التراث أكلا لما وتحبون المال حبا جما كلا إذا دكت الأرض دكا دكا وجاء ربك والملك صفا صفا وجيء يومئذ بجهنم يومئذ يتذكر الإنسان وأنى له الذكرى يقول يا ليتني قدمت لحياتي فيومئذ لا يعذب عذابه أحد ولا يوثق وثاقه أحد يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي. I seek the protection from Allah from the accursed shaitan. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. I swear by the daybreak, and the 10 nights, and the even and the odd, and the night when it departs. Truly, in that there is an oath for those who possess understanding. Have you not considered how your Lord dealt with Ad, the people of Aram, possessors of lofty buildings, the like of which were not created in the other cities, and with Samud, who hewed out the rocks in the valley, and with Fir'aun, the Lord of hosts, who committed inordinance in the cities, so they made great mischief therein. Therefore your Lord let down upon them a portion of the chastisement. Most surely your Lord is watching. And as for man, when his Lord tries him and then treats him with honor and makes him lead an easy life, he says, my Lord honors me. But when he tries him differently, that straightens to him his means of subsistence, he says, my Lord has disgraced me. Nay, but you do not honor the orphan. Nor do you urge one another to feed the poor, and you eat away the heritage, devouring everything indiscriminately, and you love wealth with exceeding love. Nay, when the earth is made to crumble to pieces, and your Lord comes, and also the angels in ranks, and hell is made to appear on that day shall men be mindful, and what shall being mindful then avail him? He shall say, oh, would that I had set before for this my life. But on that day shall no one chastise with anything like his chastisement, and no one shall bind with anything like his binding. O soul that art at rest, return to your Lord well pleased with him, well pleasing him. So enter among my servants and enter into my garden. Sadaqallahu al-Aliyyul Azim.
Yeah, Ahsan Hussayn, thank you very much for that beautiful recitation. May Allah accept all your hard work and efforts. Okay, before I pass over to Sayed, I'd just like to give you guys a quick brief on his biography. So Sayed Ali Razawi is an international speaker and teacher. He uses his background in ethics, theology and spirituality as a tool in breaking social barriers, creating awareness and healing communities. Sayed spends most of his time working in interfaith groups, working in educational institutions and charity organizations. He has also written on the need for dialogue and the concept of religion in Christianity and Islam. Having taught subjects such as Islamic theology, Islamic history, principles of jurisprudence, and comparative mysticism, Sayed carries on researching and lecturing at various universities. So without further ado, I will now pass over to Sayed Ali Razawi, who will enlighten us about today's topic. Inshallah, question and answer session will follow. So could we please welcome him with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa alaykum.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. It gives me great pleasure to be here today, and it's a university that I actually haven't been to before, but I can see many faces who are very familiar. The topic which has been given is quite an interesting one, and as you know, this week is Ashura Awareness Week. But I think the reality is far greater than that, and I think that just as opposed to just appealing to one group or one sect or one religion, you find that the tragedy of Hussayn ibn Ali is something which is transient. Now the fact that you're gathered here today, and when I'm looking around, I'm seeing people from different denominations within Islam, and it's possible that they may be non-Muslims here, because I know that within London we find that there are Sikhs, Christians, Jews, Muslims, Buddhists, and whoever's really heard about Hussayn ibn Ali and the sacrifice that he gave. And those people are generally, you find them in these lectures, you find them in these gatherings. So the fact that we're gathered here in itself symbolizes that it's a miracle, and nothing less than a miracle. That an action which took place, an act which took place 1400 years ago, and the reality is that you guys are still here commemorating year in, year out. Time goes by, but again, this kind of harara within the hearts, this fire within the hearts, according to the Prophet of God, when he looks at his grandson and he says, look, your death is such that it will create a fire in the hearts of the believers, that every time they think about this, it renews itself, that love is there. And today, for those people who have got Sky, and I think everybody has, you can go on the channels and you can see that it isn't something restricted to just one sect. It's something which is transient. Today when you go onto the Hindu TV channels, you find that even they talk about this. And in the course of our discussion, we'll look at what the Hindus in fact say. And so anyone who's exposed to this man seems to claim him for his. And you'll see this within history, that anyone from Napoleon Bonaparte to Gandhi to Malcolm X, and we'll look at all of these, that people from different areas of society, different parts of the world, say, look, what he's done, that's exactly what we believe in. Because what he's done is not just something for Islam, but he's made the stand for all of humanity. So 1400 years ago you gathered here, later, and now tell me, is there anyone who brings a person like this? In celebration, fine. You've got Christmas and you'll celebrate it. But can you get people in the mosques and in lectures and at university to come at this number? And then go tonight to the mosque and you'll see some mosques there are up to 1,000 people. And as one of the brothers was telling me, 5,000 people in West and East Africa, Pakistan, India and Iran, nothing less than 2 million in Mashhad. And you go to Karbala and you find that there are more people over in Karbala than there are on Hajj, because there's no quota system. When Saddam was chucked off, and I remember this in 2003, you find that people started influxing in, going to visit his shrine. Now go back to 1979 when Saddam banned people from going. Sunni Shia alike, he said, look, you're not allowed to go. And so you find that he diminished it to about 100,000 people. And slowly but surely it declined to about 10,000 people. And he thought, right, it's the end of it. In the same way as many of the enemies and many Khulafa before the Banu Abbas, they did the same thing. One of them being Mutawakkil Abbasi. He banned people from going. If people went, and if you look at the history, you'll see this. Tariq al-Tabari narrates this and other histories, that he'd cut people's hands, he'd kill them, he'd torture their families, but you're not allowed to go to this person's grave. And then you see the same thing that Saddam does. 2003 comes along, he's removed. And you wouldn't expect people to come. But straight away you find an influx, 5 million people. The next year, 7 million people. The next year, 9 million people. The next year, 11 million people. Last year, there was over 13 million people there. People sleeping on the roads. I know people who went from England, and they told me, they said, look, we couldn't find a place to sleep. It was freezing, it was -1 at night, but we were sleeping on the pavements. And that's what takes you there. Believe me, if you were visiting your parents, right, you wouldn't sleep on the roads. If, let's say, for example, you need to go to London, and it was -1, and you said, look, Dad, I'll come later, maybe next week. But when you look at a person like this, people are going. Have you seen him? Have I seen him? I haven't seen this man. Most of us haven't seen him. If I was to ask you, do you know how he looks like? You'll say no. Is he tall? Don't know. What color is he? We're presuming he's olivey skin because he was in Arabia at the time. So we have no idea. But there's a love within our hearts. There's a reaction there. And that's something which is a miracle. Because if I was to ask you, do you remember your grandfather? Some of your grandfathers are alive and may God keep them alive. But for those people whose grandfathers have passed away, and I look at myself, I was very close to my grandfather. He died 11 years ago. And every year comes around and you feel something. But you know what? Human beings work in two ways. Either you forget pain, slowly but surely. You don't forget it, it's there. But it dies down. It's a process of recovery. Human psychology, that they slowly begin to recover. As years go on, that pain diminishes to an extent. It's there, but it diminishes. And by the time my kids and my grandkids come, they're not going to remember my granddad. It's going to be just a name in the family tree. But when you look at somebody like Hussayn ibn Ali, you find that year in, year out, it increases. The love increases. People are there. 10 years ago, maybe you were thinking, well, why do my parents go to the mosque? Why do they commemorate these things? And today you're doing the same thing. You kids who are 19, 20, 21, you're organizing them. Your parents haven't come and organized this. There's a love in your heart that you're doing this. And that's the miracle, because it defies humanity. Human beings forget, they recover, and after a period of time it diminishes away. That's society for you, that's humanity. There is no one within history who brings these people together. Go and search it. There's no one within history. Not at all. None of the prophets have done this. And that's a statement and a half. Even on the birthday of the Prophet of God, do you not get people at that level who come for Sayyid al-Shuhada? And that's no insult, because the Prophet of God himself has said. He said that it's going to be through him that my religion is going to be saved. The religion of Allah is going to be saved. And you don't find that, and that's the reality. Go to BBC Today, go to Sky News, whatever news you want to go to. On the death day, not on the birthday of Imam Hussain, on the death day, on the day when he was martyred, you find more people than at any other gathering in the world. And that's on a yearly basis. The only other gathering you get at that stage is the Kumbh Mela, which goes on every 10 or so years, when you get 2 million or 3 million sadhus naked running into the Ganges. And other than that, you don't really find an event such as this. And you know what? It's not restricted to that. In about 6 or 7 days' time, Ashura will come. People will go to Karbala. 13 million people will be there. 40 days later on Arba'in, his 40th, you'll find another 13 million people go. You find that when it comes to the day of Hajj, those people who weren't able to go to Hajj, they'll be in Karbala. And you'll find more of a crowd there than you find on the Hajj. So you see people are going, and it doesn't mean that Shias are going or Sunnis are going, but if you look at some of the clips, you find Hindus are going, you find Sikhs are going, you find Guru Nanak made a travel to Karbala as well. So you find people who are doing this. You found Hindus, Christians, Jews, each one of them have done this. You know why? Because the sacrifice that he gave is transient. There's something within his death. We celebrate life, right? We celebrate the birth of the Prophet. We celebrate the birth of maybe other prophets. Christmas is coming along. But this is the first person in history that we celebrate his death or commemorate his death. And it's fresh for us, and people cry, and tears come into their eyes. And I've seen Christians crying. When you express to them, you tell them that this is what happened, the fact that a 6-month-old baby was killed. If your humanity is alive, tears come into your eyes. When you see and when you read a father, an old father, carrying a son on his back, 18-year-old son with his chest open, you cry because it hits your humanity. And that's what he's done. It's transient, therefore, until the day of judgment. And this was the dua of his mother, that when the Prophet of God was sitting there with the baby, Hussein, just come into the world, and she says, look, he's going to die tragically. Father, you're going to be there. He says, I'm not going to be there. He says, what about Abul Hassan? What about Ali? Is he going to be there? He says, he's not going to be there. He says, what about Hassan? Is he going to be there? He's not going to be there. He says, am I going to be there? Not going to be there. She begins to cry. Says, who's going to be there then to mourn for him? Allah sends a wahi, says, Allah will create a nation who will cry for him. And the miracle is that that nation is created, and in year out that nation cries. People have tried to stop it. They haven't been able to. Harun Rashid, Ma'mun Rashid, Mutawakkil, in the time of the Umayyads, all the way down to today. People have tried to stop it. It doesn't stop. It just continues, and it continues, and it continues. That's the miracle. You can stand up to me and you can say, so what? You shouldn't have this, it's not relevant. But you know what? It will continue. And it will go on. And it will continue until the day of judgment. And that's the promise of God. So in this way we find that his pain is transient. But why is it like this? Why has God kept his name alive? Every other individual, as big as they were, have collapsed. And I want to take you back to 1997 even. Mother Teresa passes away. Great woman. But how many of you guys remember her today? Do you know what day she died on? Do you know if it was July or August? If I was to say to you, Diana, 2 million of you, I don't know about you guys, but we were on the roads, 2 million. And at that stage on the 31st of August, there was about this many amount of cards. 6 months later, this many, and the year afterwards, it was all clean. And I remember people crying on the roads. But why is it that nobody remembers her as such today? Great people have come and gone, and there's no denying the fact that they were great people. But the question really is that they've come and gone. In the last century, great people have come and gone. But no one seems to remember them. Yet they know about them, but they remember this man. And no one's forced to. I didn't put a gun to your head to say, come today. But you came. Why? It's an invitation of God. And that's something which is special. That's something which is timeless. Because you've come. You remember that. But why is that? Is the question which is asked. Why has God preserved his name where everybody else's name isn't preserved in that way? And when you go deeper, you see this. You know why? And those verses that you recited at the end, according to many narrations, those last 3 verses are for him, peaceful soul at rest. What's the logic? The logic is just this. He gives a very critical lesson. He says, you become mukhlis, you become sincere to Allah Allah will make it timeless. There's a particular narration that says, Allah says, you keep my name alive, I'll keep your name alive. However pure anybody is, it depends upon your purity, of which Allah will keep your name alive. In the world they say today that the biggest crowd that's ever come for any funeral was in 1989 in Iran, when Ayatollah Khomeini passed away, right? 9 million people or so. Today, you don't find 9 million people gathering to come and commemorate his death day. In fact, even within Iran, you don't find people who remember it on that, other than the fact that it's a national holiday. And that's no insult to him. That's just telling you that the status of Hussein is something that even an individual like that is overshadowed by the power of this man. There is no scholar, there is no prophet who's remembered as he is. Sincerity. And that's one of the lessons that we learn from this. That he was so pure, he gave everything in the way, that when you see on the final day, on the final hour, in the final minute, when he's about to leave this world, he lifts up his hands and he says, God, Allah, I've given everything in your way. I've given my sons, given my brothers, I've given my children, I've given my ashab, everything I've given in your way. Allah, are you satisfied with me? And then he stops. Now imagine that person, all the grief of the world in his heart, because he's a man, he's a human, his heart's bursting, he knows what's going to happen. And then he says to God, he says, God, are you satisfied with me? Take until you are satisfied with me. Take everything of me then. I'm willing to give every drop of my blood for your sake. And Allah took, and by taking, he made him transient. He took that drop of blood and he made it transient. He made it such that from that drop of blood gives life. And so when you look at history, you see that probably about 50 or 60 years ago, part of the Communist Party was spreading all over the Middle East. And you find that Syria fell and Iraq fell to communism. And you find that communist strands were coming into Afghanistan and all of those countries around. But there's a particular story that I remember reading. In about the 50s, you find that they were trying to penetrate Iran. And the Iranian youth were becoming communist at the time. But there was something that kind of took them away from it all the time. So the question was asked, it was said, look, what's the story here? Communism is spreading everywhere and China isn't too far away. Why is it that within the Iranian nation, we're converting these guys towards communism, but they don't convert? So one of them replied and he said, listen, you know what, we can convert these guys, but for some reason these 10 days of Muharram come along, by Ashura day, the entire nation has gone black again. And that's one of the powers of this individual, that great revolutions in the 20th century have been created by his name. Great revolutions within history have been created by his name. There's a passion, there's a connection there. You almost feel happy that you hear that Muharram is coming. It's not because you're sadistic, it's because you feel a connection there. And that's what's important, is that connection. That today, go to the BBC and you'll see 5 years ago, so there was a documentary. And that documentary said that it's not just the Muslims who commemorate Sayyid al-Shuhada. And the first place that they interviewed was a place in Tel Aviv, and there were Jews who were sitting there, and they're commemorating. And so somebody else, and this is all in the BBC, and they asked them, and they said, listen, why are you guys commemorating? You're Jews. This is Israel. This is not Iraq or Iran or Saudi Arabia or an Islamic country. You're in Israel. What's the purpose of your commemoration? And you know, this guy replied, he said, I'm a Jew, but I've come from Karbala. That's where I live. I've been living there, our families did, they migrated. We know what this guy's about, because we've seen the miracles that have worked on the shrine. And in fact, we know what he stands for, and he stands for all of humanity. And so he says that, look, you know what? This Hussein is not just the Muslims, it's ours, because there were Jews in the army of Hussein. This was a fight for justice, this was a fight for humanity, and this is a lesson that we took. And so they shifted. From this documentary, they went to India, and they see that there's this Hindus who are there. And those Hindus can do what we can't do. Because you find that these Hindus, on the 9th night, they begin to walk barefooted, and in the city of Lucknow, where the interview was about, they're walking, and they're going barefooted. And 3 things they don't do. They don't speak, they don't eat, and they don't put any shoes on, and they continue to walk. And they walk from house to house, and they take blessings from house to house. And on the day of Ashura they come, and there's this massive coffin which is created, and they come and they touch it and whatever their tradition is. Now you tell me how many Muslims can do that, 22 hours of walking. But when you speak to these Hindus, they say, we are Hindus, we're Brahmins, but we're Hussaini Brahmins. Because we take our ideas from Hussein. You see, the whole purpose of, if you look at within Hinduism, you find that the Brahmin caste, the highest levels that they want to achieve is a status known as moksha. Moksha means fana within Islam. Fana fillah. They want to annihilate themselves. When they look at somebody like Hussein, they see a man who's reached the highest levels of annihilation. A person who's surrendered his entire world to God and was a manifestation of God. He's a walking, talking manifestation of the names and the attributes of Allah. And this is the highest level that a person can go to. And so when these Hindus see that, they recognize this. And they give us an interesting story. They give a story in which they said that, look, you claim to be followers of Hussein, we claim to be followers of Hussein as well. And in fact, we say that on the day of Ashura, Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam writes a letter, and he writes it to his uncle. And his uncle, i.e., his mother's sister's husband, who at the time was the king of India. So they have a particular story where they say that one sister married Hussein, the other sister married our king. And he writes a letter and he says, we're stuck in Karbala, come and help us. And so the Hindus said, they said, we came and we helped. You Muslims rejected him because it was Muslims who killed him. But by the time we got to Karbala, the tragedy had taken place. That's a Hindu. Now go back a couple of years, and I remember sitting in London. One Sikh after another Sikh after another. 7 Sikhs came in, took off their shirts, started beating their chest, and everybody's looking at them thinking, why are they here for? And you know what they said? And we had a conversation with them. They said, look, we know about the significance of this man because our gurus have taught us who this person was. Said that we have a Hussein as well within our tradition, and he's known as Guru Gobind Singh. And so in this way you find that they also take from that. We all take from that, right? And in this way Christianity, go to Lebanon and you'll see the Christians of Lebanon. And the famous one is George Yordak, who wrote a book on Imam Ali alayhi salam. Said that, look, he's ours because he gave us something. He gave us stability. The golden era of Christianity and Judaism was under the Islamic domain, and the most rights that was given by Ali, and of course then afterwards they identified the sacrifice of his son. So if throughout the world these religions are recognizing this man, why don't people recognize him today in the West? You know why? Because we haven't done our homework properly. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam says, very famous narration, he says, look, if you want people to come towards us, give them our sayings. They'll naturally come towards us. The problem is we haven't marketed it properly. We don't go out of our way. Because those people who have done, they've been moved by it. And I want to just go to Google today and Google it. You know what Gandhi says? And I remember last week I was in a meeting, Muslim Hindu forum, they were starting, first of its kind in the country. And government members and other people sitting there. And this Hindu guy gets up and he says, you know when we want a saying, we've got all the way back to Gandhi. He's our backup. And I smiled and I said, do you know who Gandhi's backup was? He says, no, go and look at it. It was Hussein. And that's what Gandhi himself says. He says that, look, when it comes to this revolution, this peaceful protest that we've done, and this is in the contemporary times. Is it something 1400 years ago? This is a contemporary movement that took place. A movement whereby people were protesting peacefully. He says, I've come to understand peaceful protest through Hussein ibn Ali. He says, this is what Islam stands for. In those days, it's as if he's predicting that there will be a terrorist Islam in the future. And again, there's no such thing as terrorism within Islam. Because terrorism, when it first started, in the history, when the Khawarij came, they were called Khawarij because of the fact that they were outside Kharij of Islam. There is no terrorism as such. If you look at even our history, you go towards our ethics, you find that on the battlefield, a Muslim cannot kill a person even on the battlefield if he turns his face away. If he turns his back and he's walking away, you can't hit a person. You can't hit an unarmed individual. You can't hit a person not facing you. So when we talk about people blowing themselves up, that's haram in Islam, that's not even Islamic. And even when they come and they blanket bomb us and they say, we're liberating your country, even that's haram for us. Because we say that we're the followers of that Sayyid al-Shuhada, who goes to Karbala and he shows the world that, listen, I'm going to stick within my ethics. even if you attack me 100 to 1 man. And that's what they did. And this is where he stood there and he said, look, I'm not out for a battle. If I was out for a battle, I wouldn't take my women. What's the point of me taking my children? So people said to him, you're going to die. He says, I know I'm going to die, but I'm protesting. I'm making a difference. I'm shedding my blood to give life to Islam. And this is why when Imam Sayed Ali Abass was sitting in Medina, a person comes to him and he says, O son of the Prophet, tell us, who won, Yazid or your dad? He says, why don't you go and pray 2 units of prayers and then come back and I'll give you the answer. He comes back and he says, do I need to give you the answer? The fact that you're praying 2 units of prayers means that my father won, because Yazid was the one who wanted to destroy that. Look at his poetry and you'll see this. What does Yazid write? He says that there was no wahi, there was no prophet. This was a game by the Bani Hashim. This is the kind of things that he's writing. His kufr is within his own poetry. And that's open for everyone. You don't need to be an expert to see that. You could just go to the library, open up and see what Yazid's poetry was about. So this was a game. This was a game by Bani Hashim. There's no wahi, there's no prophethood. And so, this is where Imam Hussayn thought, right, we need to make a difference here. We need to save Islam here. And it makes no difference to me whether I die or not. As the poet said, that when Hussayn found out, he says, if the deen, if the religion of my grandfather requires my blood, then swords come and chop off my neck. And he goes there and he says to the people, and he says, look, I'm going to die. I don't want you to be with me. Go, save yourself. On the 9th night you see that. He's saying, go. And they said, we're not going to leave you. And Hussayn begins to cry. And he makes that famous sermon and he says that my grandfather used to call his ashab. They wouldn't come to him. In Uhud they ran away and left him. My father Ali would call and the Kufis ran and left him. My brother Hassan would call and they wouldn't come. I'm telling my companions to go and they don't go. He says that my companions are better than my grandfathers and my fathers and my brothers. No one has had companions like this. And so in this way, he's there and he's saying to them, you go. But then at the same time, when he's saying to people to go, he's also writing letters to certain people and saying, come. And that famous story is in front of us, that there was a Christian woman, she was going, and she wanted water, and she's thirsty. And Imam sees, and he comes forward, he hits the ground, water starts flowing. She goes, that's a miracle, who are you? He says, I'm the grandson of the Prophet. She says, I convert to Islam. He says, do you need anything from me? He says, yes, tell your son, I want him to be with me and to die with me. Whereas he's saying to most of his companions, go, he's saying to a Christian, come. And the Christian came, and he fought, and they chopped his neck off, and they chucked his head to his mother. Mother grabs the head, says, I've given him in the way of God, take it back. Chucks it back. But the reality is this, why is Hussayn calling some people and telling some people to go? Think about it. What's the logic behind that? What is the message? You know what he's trying to do?
No, gosh.
Sorry?
Not forcing them to come fight for Islam, so you can go yourself.
Yeah, he's forcing some people. He's saying, please come and help me. You know why? He's taking people to the other level. That's basically what it is. You see, us as human beings, we're traveling. We're going to a level of perfection. What this perfect man, Insan Kamil, is doing is he's saying to people, I want to take you to the highest levels. By him taking people to Karbala, he knew those people who were at that level to be able to take the jump to the final levels. And he took them and he took them there. And when we talk about Imam Mahdi, that's the system of Imam Mahdi as well. People say, look, why doesn't he come? Why doesn't Allah put bliss in the world? The purpose is this. Until we ourselves are not ready, what's the point of him coming? You know what ready means? And this is where really the speech starts, and I'm thinking a lot of time is gone. But we're going to go for it today. How is Hussayn relevant today? You see, the school, the maktab of Hussayn is a philosophy within itself. It's a philosophy that's not restricted to Muslims. It's a philosophy that's restricted to humanity. Who is this man? He stands up against a tyrant. He says, it makes no difference to me whether my life goes, because I'm sincere with Allah. Everything is for the sake of Allah. But despite that, there's an ethics that God has given. And I'm going to stay within the parameters of these ethics. I'm not going to cheat, I'm not going to connive, I'm not going to steal, I'm not going to do any of these things. And so firstly, he says to the people, he says, look, there's a narration that says this, I'll go to India, I'll go to Hind. I'll leave your side. Yazid says, no, I want his head. Imam says, if you're going to go for my head, then let's do it in a way that I remain timeless. And that's what he does. 124,000 prophets, right? The seal of the prophets is our prophet. Allama Tabatabai says, he says, if you want to see 124,000 prophets, look at Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Adam, prophet. Nuh, our prophet. Ibrahim, our prophet. Musa, our prophet. Isa, our prophet. All of those prophets are there, right? And if you want to see the completion of the deen, go to Ghadir. But if you want to see the savior of the prophet, look at Hussein. Our prophet brought the message. Hussein saved the message. Zainab saved Hussein. And that's what's important. And people generally ask, they say, look, why did Hussein take his sister with him? You know why? Because she saved the religion, because she saved his name. And this tells us the significance that our religion is not complete without the help of a woman as well. You know, a lot of times it's a male society dominant. Look at Ahlulbayt. Every step of the way you see them. The Prophet of God, Khadija, was there. The mother of believers, Aisha, comes, she says, look, Ya Rasulullah, why are you crying for her all the time? She's old, she's gone. You've got younger women around you, wives. Replies, it says, no, she helped me when nobody helped me. In a particular narration, it's narrated that Jibreel comes down, and the Prophet of God is on the mountain, and he's meditating. And Jibreel says, your wife is coming. She's coming to give you water. She's coming to give you food. Allah sends his salam, and I send my salam on this woman. Because she's walking, and she's walking barefooted up a mountain. Her feet are cut, they're bleeding, but she's coming for your sake. When she comes in, Prophet of God says, Allah sends his salam. Jibreel sends his salam. Prophet is crying, he says that woman saved me. She did everything for me. And in this way, you go to Fadak and you see that Fatima Zahra supporting Ali ibn Abi Talib every step of the way. And in the same way, when you come to Hussein, you find Zainab. Sayyidah Zainab stands up in the court of Yazid, and the way that she speaks so eloquently, that she changes the hearts of people. That if today Islam has got to us, it's because of that woman. It's always a partnership with Ahlul Bayt. That's what people don't like. In those days, the Arabs were trying to keep their women back. Ahlul Bayt was saying no. Yes, there's hijab. Yes, there's specific places. But you know what? Islam is not completed without the help of these women. Prophet of God says, every single sect narrates this. Fatima tu bad'atun minni. Fatima is a part of me. Who's saying that? That Prophet who the Quran says, وَمَا يَنْتِكُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ اللَّهُ وَحْيًا يُوحَىٰ. Muhammad doesn't speak out of his desires. Whatever he says is wahi ilahi. Allah is saying that. That's not an exaggeration there. The Prophet doesn't exaggerate. When the Prophet of God says that Fatima is a part of me, he's saying that she's a part of me. In a sense, she's a part of everything that I am today. Every step of that way, she was with him. And so this is what's important here. It's a transient, timeless message. The very first message that we gain is that in the battle of truth and justice, it's as much of a responsibility of our men as it is of our women as well. If we're going to go forward to Imam Mahdi, if we're going to go forward to change things and to establish justice, if we're going to establish peace in the world, then we need our women and our men together side by side to take that message. Yes, they have different kind of functions, but the reality is that they need to work as a team. And so this Hussein then is transient. You know why? Because the entire journey of Hussein, when you look at it in the abstract way, in the metaphysical way, equals the journey of life for human beings. He starts off at the point which is known as Medina. Medina is the center of Islam. You start off at the very same point at the beginning. The entire concept is known as Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. In Irfan, we call it the arc of ascending and descending. You come from the point of Allah, you come into the world, and you go back to Allah. It's a cycle. You go through realities. In the same way as Hajj, when you look at Hajj, it symbolizes the same thing. You start your Hajj off at the Kaaba. Allah says, now go to the furthest point. You go to Arafah. Arafah is the furthest point. This symbolizes the arc of descent. Arafah, inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Finally, you end up again back at the Kaaba. When you go to the furthest point, what does Arafah symbolize? Arafah comes from ma'rifah, ma'rifah of Allah. You've been sent in this world to gain ma'rifah of Allah. The highest knowledge is ma'rifatul Jabbar, knowledge of Allah. Hussayn is teaching you that. He's saying that within every circumstance and situation, it's ma'rifat of Allah. We need to go, we need to leave the city of my grandfather. He's crying, he doesn't want to leave, but he says he needs to leave now. He goes to the furthest point, from Mecca he goes towards Karbala. It's the journey of life, it's a struggle. When he gets there, Karbala is the earth, Karbin wa bala'in. It's a place of torment, it's a place of torture. And that's what this world is restricted. And you're here, in this restriction. Within you at this moment in time, there is a Zainab and there is a Yazid. Your Zainab is your consciousness. It tells you right from wrong. Your Yazid is your nafsa ammara, as the Quran says. Inna nafsa la ammaratan bis-su' illa ma rahima rabbi. And it's battling. لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي كَبَدٍ. Hussayn, Yazid, a very famous alim, was asked a question, Nurani, very famous Sufi, mystic, Sunni Sufi mystic. Somebody comes to him and he says, what sect are you? Are you Shia? Are you Sunni? He looks at him and he goes, no. He goes, after Karbala, there are only two sects, either Hussayn or Yazid. He says, I'm with Hussayn. And you see, this is what it is. Because here now is a man in Karbala standing there and he's sacrificing, selfless. And this is that message on a personal level, that we need to make sacrifices. If you are saying that you're a Muslim, know that God is going to test you. And if you want to reach the highest levels of ma'rifah, then you've got to go through hurdles. You've got to be able to sacrifice everything. The highest level that we talk about is the level of La ilaha illallah. And what does La ilaha illallah mean? La ilaha illallah means there is no family but Allah. There is no money but Allah. There is no relationship but Allah. There is no world but Allah. There is not me but Allah. You are negating everything and you are saying that the only thing which is real is Allah. And so Hussayn goes there, companions die, sons die, children die, he dies, everything finishes. And even then he says, the final thing is in sajda. And what is he saying? He's saying to Allah that you are great. Subhana Rabbil A'la wa bihamdih. What a way. But he's symbolizing to humanity. He says, look, whatever I'm doing is for the sake of Allah. My entire life, my death, my fasting, it's for the sake of Allah. It's for the sake of truth, justice. You know what Allah's name is? His name is Haqq, truth. That whether you know it or you don't, every one of us believes in an Allah. Even an atheist does. You ever thought about it? When an atheist wakes up in the morning, what does he do? Same thing that we do, wash our face. Why? Beauty is in our fitrah. You know, beauty is a property of God. Quran, it says, Fitratullah allati fatara an-nasa alayha. Allah's created the fitrah of man on the fitrah of himself. Created in the surah of Allah, in the image of Allah. Every religion says that. One of the things about the fitrah is we like beauty. Atheists like beauty. He doesn't believe in a God, but he likes beauty. We like perfection. Atheist likes perfection. We like truth. He likes truth. Or she likes truth. We like good. They like good. Without knowing it, they're following God because all of the properties are godly. Sometimes in logic we say this, right? We say this in logic. We say that there can be different names for a particular thing. You call it water, I'll call it ma, somebody calls it ab. 3 different languages, but when you describe it, it's the same thing, it's water. In the same way, your body, your description, your consciousness, without knowing it, is going towards Allah. You're trying to implement all of the properties of Allah. So when you look at an atheist, you think, subhanAllah, look, you're doing exactly what you've been created for. You don't know it, but it's there. And in the same way, us lot, we're working for that. It's within our fitrah. So you see what Hussayn symbolizes is a message that is within our fitrah. This move towards justice. You see, one of the most important things in our life is that we need to establish ethics. Without ethics, you're not going to get anywhere. Ethics teaches us how to live. It teaches us how to have akhlaq. Is how to be good people. They say that the biggest ethic, for example, generosity is ethics. To be generous is a good thing. To be trustworthy is a good thing. To be truthful is a good thing. To be giving is a good thing. When you take all of these virtues and you combine them together, it equals justice. So the prime mover, the gel, according to Aristotle, according to Socrates, according to virtue ethics, the prime mover is what? Justice. And what is Hussein teaching? Teaching justice. That's what it is. That justice is manifest within your heart. So when you look at this, the internal journey that you have, it is important for you then to also change your own self, not to point fingers at other people, to see what my duty is. Hussein didn't point fingers at other people. He said, what's my duty? It's like that frog. Abraham has been chucked into the fire. There's a frog coming, or in another narration, there's a bird. In his beak, takes a bit of water, chucks it on the fire, looks up and he says, what are you going to do? Fire is big, you're small. Replies, says, at least I can say to Allah on the Day of Judgment, I did my best. And that's the relevance of it today. On a personal level, the relevance is we need to try our best. But that's only one dimension of it. Let's look at it on an even bigger dimension. Let's look at it in terms of society. We are social creatures. We're not restricted from our society. Islam hasn't said be a Buddha, go to the cave, sit there for 40 years and recite Allahu. Because if you do that, that's a good thing. But what about the rest of the social things that you need to do? You see, Islam is a religion which is dynamic, multifaceted. It's multifaceted. It has different properties and functions. You find that it's only within Islam you have a social policy, you have an economic policy, you have family policies, you have spiritual, you have education, intellectual. There are so many different parts of your existence. So what Islam is doing is it's telling you, look, it's a complete religion. So therefore it's important to have a social structure as well. We in the 21st century, when the situation is really bad, go yesterday and you'll see, it seems like there's going to be a war in the Middle East very soon. Another war. Britain are in dialogue at the moment, or kind of severe dialogue with Iran. After yesterday, the students stormed the embassy. So what you're finding is that the situation is getting bad. We have a responsibility, right? Islam is being portrayed negatively in the press. That type of Islam that most people in this country don't even as Muslims, we don't recognize that Islam. That's not Islam what these guys are doing, but they're portraying that. The average person on the road, despite the fact that we're living in a global village, when you say to the Muslim, they think big beard, rucksack, Reebok shoes, and Nike socks. That's what they think that a Muslim is. It's not the case. We're saying it's not the case. Saying we're those Muslims who Christianity wouldn't have flourished if there was no Islam. Thomas Aquinas is a big guy when it comes to theology. His entire theology is based on Ibn Sina. Rationalist philosophical movement of René Descartes. Well, that's 400-500 years ago. Back of Ibn Rushd. If it wasn't for Ibn Rushd, there would be no René Descartes, there would be no philosophical revolution within Europe. So when you look at this, Islam has played a major part. Europe was in the Dark Ages. Up to the advent of Islam, they thought having a bath once every 2 years was hygienic. Islam came along and said at least have a bath every Friday. They had nothing. Hence it's known as the Dark Ages. Islam came in and revived them. Books were translated from Arabic into Latin, were sent through Spain and Venice. The ports are still there. Those people have been to Venice. You see old relics of the Umayyad dynasty which are over there. Those ports are still there within South Spain. Knowledge was sent there. It made Europe, the background for European advancement is on the basis of Islam. And there's enough material out there that you can read on this issue. So, in this way, we as a society now need to come together to be united. The enemy divides us. You're Sunni, you're Shi'i, you're Fulani, you're Fulani, we're divided. The Prophet of God was to come today. Would he like that? He'd say, look, you're all divided, you're killing each other. All of you claim to love me. You say to a Shia, he's going to blindly profess. He said, well, we love the Prophet more than the Sunni does. You come to the Sunni, he says, no, we love the Prophet more. How about you take all of your loves together and you do something? Unite yourself. Become stronger. Organize yourself. Educate your children. And make yourself into an alternative in this country. You can say to the country, you can say, listen, we have an alternative. You have technology, but your social system is rubbish. Your family system is breaking. You've got people who are depressed. You've got rioting which is going on in inner city London. 2 weeks ago I was at a conference discussing the riots at UCL. Christian, Jewish speaker, communities, they were all there. Each one of them said one thing. They said that, look, we don't have a system anymore of education, of ethics. Schools, they don't have a system. You go to universities and schools for the sake of your job, not to educate yourself. There's no ethics gone. Everyone agreed it's the duty of faiths to educate them. And a point that I raised was that even the parents are not educated. How are they supposed to educate their kids? Because ethically they're not. So in this way, this religion needs to show the alternative. We need to say, we're a religion that can get people like this on a Thursday night into the mosques. We know what our kids are doing. You'll find that in London, not one of those rioters was a Muslim. We can make a difference in our societies, despite the fact that people may portray us negatively, especially the followers of Ahlulbayt. Let me ask you a question. How many terrorists today have been a follower of Ahlulbayt? None of them have. Each one of them have one ideology. And that ideology goes back to a particular country. But the vast majority of Muslims are peace-loving people. You pay taxes, you do all of these things. You can, if you became united, if you came together, could show an alternative. That's the relevance of Hussein. Selflessness. One man can make a difference. 72 people against 100,000 army, right? That's one man standing there. One person, even in this room, if they decide to change. Going back to the first thing that we said, spiritual development of the self, which has a knock-on effect on society. One man makes the difference, one woman, and naturally it goes on. And it's important for our women to also make that difference. Because the future children, the future development, the future societies are going to come from our sisters. Today, people may say, look, that's kind of a sexist thing to say. But it's the truth. I've never seen a pregnant man other than a couple of years back when that guy was pregnant. And I've never seen kids initially so close to their dads. It's very rare. Most children, you speak to them and they're close to their dads. Or are they? Close to their mothers, of course. The first university in Islam is University of the Mother, and I think they're getting excited at the other room. But look, in a nutshell, well, they've started their festivities, so we're going to start off on a bit of a discussion. But you guys tell me, we need to take this message of Sayyid al-Shuhada, we need to take his spirituality, we need to take his love, we need to take his spiritual perfection, we need to understand how he treated his family. Many a time when you're stressed out and you come home, and many men do this, they're stressed out from work and they take it out on their wife. You can't be more stressed than Hussein. People are dying around him, but the way that he's speaking to his sister is calm, collective. He's showing akhlaq in dealing with your family, and that kind of a stress. So when you take all of these things, treatment of family, friends, relatives, society, treatment of your enemy, look at the ethics of war. He comes out and he says, look, do you know who I am? I'm the grandson of the Prophet. I don't want to fight you. I want to save you. You're not my enemy. Ignorance is my enemy. He's teaching them, he's educating them, even the enemy, even after they've killed a son. And he's trying to converse with them, he's trying to change them. He's saying, look, I'm not doing it for myself, I'm doing it for Allah. I want you to become better people. And we, even amongst ourselves, when it comes to personal grudges, he cut me up. He swore at me. That's let's go. My children and my children's children are his enemy then. Most of our family problems, right, when you see it, you ask one of the kids, says, why don't you speak to your cousin? He says, no, because my dad had a falling out with his dad. You go to the dad, he said, I don't know, my granddad had a falling out with his granddad. And no one knows the real reason. Nafs. Hussayn is saying, break your nafs. So that Allah himself says, Ya ayyatuha nafsul mutmainna, arji ila rabbiki radiyatan maradiyya. That status that brings a man back to Allah. The status that you're at peace. You see this man, Christian narrator writes. One of the narrations he says, and he was in Karbala as present. He was saying that this guy is the first person in history that I've seen. That the more people are dying, the more we're oppressing him, the more his face is at peace. The more the light is shining. One of the Christian narrators writes, he says that I wanted to see them cut, Hussein said, so I could write it down. He says, but I was mesmerized by the light on his face, that by the time I realized his head had been hoisted on a spear. Here's a man then who's at peace with the decree of his Lord. He says, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره. He submits to the amr of Allah, the will of Allah. And that's something very difficult to say. You have a problem in your life, can you submit to that? Oh, really? These are the messages. So really, in a three-part way, take his message, take it to the people. Spiritually work on yourself. Wow. You went hammered, sir. And work on your societies to develop them. But anyway, I'm going to open it to you guys for questions then. Yeah, salawat please.